Not really. I'm really concerned for our country. We have a great country. We have a radical left group of lunatics out there, just absolute lunatics, and we're going to get that problem solved. I'm only concerned for the country. Yeah.
Mr. President, how do you want to see your supporters respond to this? Charlie Kirk was a big advocate of nonviolence and free speech on campus. How do you want your supporters to respond, sir?
I think that way. He was an advocate of nonviolence. That's the way I'd like to see people respond. Say it?
Did you speak with his family?
I did. I spoke to Erica, his wife, and we had a long talk, and she's devastated. She is absolutely devastated, as you can imagine.
Are you concerned?
I'd rather not say. I think progress is being made. He's an animal, total animal. And hopefully they'll have him and they'll get him. What he did is disgraceful. Charlie Kirk was a great person, a great man, great in every way, especially with youth. And what he did, what this man did, was disgraceful. So hopefully we'll have him and we will deal with him very appropriately.
How do I see my role and where we are in this moment? And what I'm going to do is what I've always done. I'm always about turning down the temperature and encouraging members to walk in the dignity of their office and treat one another with dignity and respect. And I think this is an important moment for leaders to say that, to speak to the more permanent things. We get spun up. Sorry, I'm short of breath. I ran up the steps. We get spun up in current affairs and policy debates and political arguments. But at a moment like this, I think you got to focus on the permanent things. That's what I call it. And that's the founding principles of the country and what makes us the great nation that we are. The free marketplace of ideas, vigorous debate, but the idea, we don't make it personal. We don't hold it against people individually. We don't think of our friends and neighbors and fellow countrymen and even political opponents as enemies. We're all Americans, and that's a really important message for all of us right now. Charlie Kirk, that was his legacy, is that he believed in that. He loved vigorous debate. He loved to fill the free marketplace of ideas with conservative thought and argument, but he never hated anybody on the other side of the argument. He loved them. He was motivated by that. And what I loved about my friend Charlie is that he was the first person to extend a hand of friendship, put his arm around somebody in a gesture of love after the debate. He was always open to that. The point was, he wanted to try to lead them to the truth as he saw it. He was a man of deep faith as I was. We talked about that a lot. And that was his objective. And I think that's a great legacy that he leaves, and I think it's something that we ought to echo. And that's what I'm going to be about. So that's the answer to the question. I'll continue to do what I've always tried to do here, especially in a moment like this. We have colleagues on both sides of the aisle who are in a different place this morning than they were yesterday. People have been shaken by this event. Charlie Kirk did not die in a car accident. He died in an assassination for his beliefs. He was exercising his First Amendment freedom on a university campus, which is supposed to be the free marketplace of ideas, and he got killed for it.
Well, look, the bottom line is this is a time that all Americans should come together and feel and mourn what happened. Violence, which affects so many different people of so many different political persuasions, is an affliction of America. And coming together is what we ought to be doing, not pointing fingers of blame.
This moment requires leadership that brings the American people together as opposed to trying to further divide us. Political violence in any form against any American is unacceptable, should be denounced by everyone, and moving forward, we have to figure out a better way to come together, not as Democrats or Republicans, but as Americans. This is a moment where all of us have to come together, not as Democrats or Republicans, as blacks or whites or Latinos or Asians, as Americans. We need to come together as Americans. Thank you, everyone.
I was just going to say the first reaction of everybody ought to be to say, this is a horrible thing, we ought to come together, and not try to seek political advantage from it.
I will not be doing any outdoor events anytime soon. We will not be doing any public events anytime soon until we have a better handle on greater security controls. I have local police right now sitting outside my offices in South Carolina to be a deterrence. I have pro-tranny protesters at my offices protesting every week. I like going outside in the heat and offering them food and water and having a colloquy, having a conversation that is peaceful. I'm not able to do that right now. I'll start carrying again when I'm back home, and when I'm allowed to carry where it's reciprocal in other states, I will have a firearm on my person all the time, and I will have security.
I mean, I think the question is what constitutes a boiling point. You know, we are certainly and we have been living in a time of extraordinary and growing political violence in the United States. I mean, we were on these steps here on January 6th when a mob attacked this Capitol. Just a couple of months ago, a Democratic lawmaker was assassinated in her own home. Yesterday, Charlie Kirk assassinated in broad daylight in front of thousands of people. It really, at this point, is not about like the political stripe. This is about the emergence and uncorking of violence that we're talking about, and it is absolutely gotten to a point that is where we need to really look towards our leaders to lower the temperature and also lead by, I believe, in my view, ensuring that we have gun safety and laws against violence in the books.
Congressman, yesterday the president.
Profile member of Capitol Hill.
Pardon?
Do you feel safe on Capitol Hill?
From the moment I was elected, I have felt that I accept a certain level of risk in doing this job and in continuing to do this job. This should not be a level of risk for anyone, not for me or anybody, any American. No American should feel like they are taking a risk sending their kid to school. No American should feel like they are at risk going to a music festival, going to a synagogue, going to a church, or showing up to work. And I think that I feel the way I think many Americans feel.
Yesterday the president, in his speech, he was very critical of left-wing violence. What do you think of that message, and do you agree with them that left-wing violence is a problem?
I believe that we need to be very clear about the facts of the ground. There was a horrific political assassination or shooting yesterday in which a young man died. The FBI has not caught the assailant. The FBI and the individual responsible has not been apprehended. There is no understanding, as we know publicly, of who this individual is, what their motivations were, where they came from, and for any politician, whether it's a pundit on television, which I saw on Fox News and it was extremely disturbing, using rhetoric of vengeance and violence, whether it is a member of Congress, whether it is the President of the United States, to assume and assert and cast blame when the FBI has failed to even apprehend the assailant is absolutely an irresponsible action. We must come together. Our responsibility is to de-escalate this environment, to reduce the level of chaos that is at risk right now in this country, so that we can, first and foremost, increase the level of safety that people can feel in this country, and then we can move forward together.
Concerns for your personal safety as a pretty high-profile member of Congress?
I mean, you always think about it, but a lot of people have asked the question, do you think you need more money? You could have had a fleet of security guards, and no one would have noticed a guy laying down on a rooftop. When you're talking about 200 yards, you're talking about Longworth from here. That's 200 yards. That's how far away that shooter was. So I think we all need to kind of think about outdoor events more, because you take what happened yesterday in Butler, and it's terrible that we have to even have that conversation, but that's certainly something that I think when you talk about security, you need to think about. Outdoor events probably are going to be a lot fewer in numbers for members of Congress, at least in the short term.
How do you tone down the rhetoric?
I don't know. Both parties are guilty of it, and hopefully, you have incidents like what happened yesterday. You take today's a very solemn day with September 11th and what happened with Charlie Kirk yesterday. So hopefully, we'll do better in Congress, and hopefully the media, you guys will do better, and hopefully these events will become fewer and fewer, not greater and greater.
I didn't know Mr. Kirk personally, but this is a tragedy. And it's one that's been repeated. In Minnesota, the former House Speaker, a Democrat, murdered in her home with her husband, leaving 2 children. In this situation, Mr. Kirk murdered in appearance in Utah, leaving a wife and 2 children. Unfortunately, violence has become part of our political life that is so reprehensible, but it's so common.
Is there anything Congress can do to stop the stem of political violence right now that seems to be escalating in this country?
Of course there is. We have the power to do a lot of things we should do, so I'm concerned for sane gun policy, but I don't think we have the political will nor the president to support it.
We've seen some rhetoric from Republicans in the House blaming Democrats for the actions that occurred against Mr. Kirk yesterday. Do you think that kind of rhetoric is productive?
No, I don't. I think we ought to be careful. We don't know who the shooter was. We don't know what his motive was, whatever it might have been. And to rush to judgment at this point and point fingers is just to be more divisive.
Does this heighten concerns about your own sense of personal safety when you come to work here?
Well, in 20 years leading up to 2015, we had 2 incidents of political violence against elected officials. In the 10 years since, we've had 25. The numbers tell a story. It is much more dangerous than it used to be.
Yeah, Charlie made a real difference in a short period of time. It's one of the big reasons I think President Trump won. He was able to connect with young people unlike anybody I've ever seen in the conservative movement. So it's just tragic. He's got 2 young kids. His wife today is trying to explain to his 2 young kids why Dad won't come home. And I've been pleased with the response from politicians and leaders throughout the country condemning this. And we need to condemn it, but kind of recommit ourselves to make sure that we can disagree in a better way.
Does this heighten your concern about your own personal sense of safety, and would you like to see more security come into work?
I think we just need to be smart. That's what these folks try to do. They try to scare you into inaction, and I think that's the last thing that Charlie would want, is for people to be quiet, whether you agree with him or not. So life moves on here. He will be missed by a lot of people, but his legacy will be young conservatives, how they affect the country over the time. That'd be a heck of a legacy. But I tell folks all the time, like in a military unit, when you lose somebody, you have to get up and go back to work the next day. You got to stay in the fight, and so let's mourn his loss and celebrate his life, and get back to focusing on what we need to do as a nation to be safe.
We're in a moment that is sickening and stomach-turning, but also profoundly scary. As a public official who goes to fairs, parades every weekend in public, I've reached a point where I really rethink some of what I'm doing, which is in no way to constrain my accessibility, but simply to be more careful. And it's a profoundly scary, stomach-turning point in our history when we are so vulnerable to this kind of violence, and it is so repetitive and regretful.
The president was condemning left-wing violence last night as part of this. Do you see that as the problem here?
Violence of all kinds is abhorrent, and the attempt to attribute it to one political view or another, I think, misses the point, which is that the increasing pace and quickening repetition of violence ought to be condemned no matter what political stripe it appears to reflect. We are at a precipice in this country when public discourse will no longer be possible, when public appearances will be reduced because of the legitimate fear that a single crazy person can imperil public officials who make themselves accessible.
Should Congress increase security from members? Should they do more to keep you safe?
There will be a move, unquestionably, to provide greater security, but as somebody who has done law enforcement and been the object of threats over the years, I am very clear-eyed that someone who wants to get someone else probably can do it, even with some security. And we need to be realistic that the frame of the conversation needs to be changed in this country so that no longer is political violence a weapon for political advantage. And it should be condemned no matter whether we think it's left, right, center. It's totally to be condemned.
We've seen some pretty hot rhetoric from Republicans on the House floor and some people on X posting about how this is Democrats' fault. That was said on the House floor yesterday. Is that kind of rhetoric productive? What is the right path forward?
Fault finding and blame gaming politically only aggravate the problem because they increase and exaggerate the level of emotion and the potential resort to violence by extremist elements. So I think we need to be mindful of extremist violence in this country that's inspired by overheated rhetoric. The inflamed discourse in this country needs to be cooled, and we all have a responsibility to do it.
For almost 10 years now. I remember the day exactly when I first met him in Dallas. And gosh, he would have been like 22 years old back then. So it's a terrible, terrible loss. I was just stunned when you were the first one to give me that news. I was just stunned when I heard the news, and my heart just goes out to his wife and their two beautiful children, such small children. They're even younger than my kids. So this is just, it's beyond tragic. And I think we've got to get to a point in this country where we can disagree and not resort to violence. I mean, this is just unlike anything I've seen in my lifetime. It's just unbelievable. People can go to rallies without fear of getting shot. I mean, Charlie's not even running for office. I mean, he's just a guy, private citizen out there, a unique private citizen, obviously, incredibly effective. But my gosh, you can't go to a college campus and not be shot. There's something really, really wrong here. So I hope that part of his legacy, he was such a man of faith, which is something we shared together. I hope that will reverberate and people will remember what's most important in life. Politics is not most important in life. It just isn't. And I hope that part of his legacy here will be a wake-up call to that.
As a public official, does this make you less likely to do events outside or travel in public spaces like that? Are you concerned?
No, it doesn't. I think part of that is that you can't give in to the violence. I mean, you just can't, if we all retreat into our private spaces and close our doors and stay behind locked doors and windows and gates. I mean, we need the opposite of that. We need to be able to come together, even when we disagree. Yeah, that's what Charlie was doing yesterday. That's what's so sad about this, is he was sitting there debating openly. I think the sign over his poster, or the poster over his head was, "Prove me wrong," and he was just, which he always, this is how he did. He was so cheerful. So that's a sign of what we should be doing. He's doing it out in public, out in the open in an amphitheater. That's exactly what we should be doing. So no, this will not deter me from doing what I always do, and I hope that other people will take up his mantle on both sides, left and right. But I just want to underscore, I hope people realize that when they have deep disagreements on politics, although I frankly don't think the country is nearly as divided as we're told all the time, but politics is not the most important thing in life. It is not. And Charlie lived that, and I hope people in the wake of this will see that. That'll lead to a new sense of grace in our national life, and we say, you know what, okay, I really disagree with what that person's saying. Maybe they even drive me a little nuts. But you know what? There's more important things than that. I'm going to show them a measure of grace, even forgiveness, and that's what's going to unite us as a nation. That's what we need. Yeah.
In his statement last night, President Trump made very specific comments about left-wing political violence.
Yeah.
We've heard some Republicans on the House floor blaming Democrats for what happened yesterday. What's the path forward on that? Is that the correct way to be responding to this, or is there a productive way, I guess, would be better?
Well, I think we do need to condemn the violence. There's no gainsaying the fact that we've had 3 major assassination attempts, or in Charlie's case, successful in the last year and a half, and they have been all against conservative political figures. But, you know, I mean, listen, I just think at the end of the day, we've got to say it was Lincoln who said there should be no appeal in a republic from ballots to bullets. And we've got a lot of people right now in the country who think an appeal to bullets is a good thing. And we cannot go on like that. Our country will not survive like that. So I think we need to hear that from both sides of the aisle, that we can disagree even vehemently. But we got to remember what we love together as Americans. We love a lot more things together than we disagree on. We really do. It's what unites us as a country. And our faith in our family is part of that. You know, and I just try to live that. And I hope that I hope this weekend, you know, people go home and think about, man, what do I really love? I love my wife. I love my husband. I love my kids. I love my neighborhood. You know, I bet all of your fellow Americans love all those things too. You know, we've got to remember what we love together. We have to.
Does Congress have a role to play at all to sort of kind of bring down this temperature at all? Or
Yeah, sure.
We've seen political violence.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've got to quit referring to our political opponents as terrorists and Hitler and, you know, whatever. Fill in your pejorative. I mean, again, listen, I mean, nobody's more aggressive in the hearing than I am. I mean, nobody is going to be more forthright when I have a view than me. But that doesn't mean you have to tear down your opponents and call for them to be killed. And we're seeing this all over, all the time, in prominence. You know, Charlie posted not that long ago on social media about the culture of political assassination. I mean, how horrifically ironic that he then would become the leading example of that. You know, I mean, a culture of assassination. I mean, that was accurate. This has just got to stop. It's got to stop. So I think we do need to condemn violence forthrightly wherever we see it. And, you know, listen, we also, for the people who commit these crimes, we've got to be relentless about this, you know, and we've got to raise the penalties for people who commit crimes of violence, who use weapons in crimes of violence. I mean, we just have to. We need to send a message on the back end that if you do this or attempt to do it, you're going to go away to prison forever. I'm a supporter of the death penalty in cases where it's warranted. But, you know, that's after the fact. Before the fact, we've got to together decide that, you know, hey, let's be able to, you know what, let's come together and be able to go out to a college amphitheater and have a discussion and all go home and, you know, say afterwards, like, hey, that was a great debate, you know. We may have our differences, but my gosh, politics is not the most important thing in life.
This is another atrocious tragedy, leaving a wife, leaving 2 little babies behind. And we have seen it too much. I have seen it firsthand in my state this summer with the horrible murder of our Speaker of the House, Melissa Hortman, and her husband, and the shooting of Senator Hoffman and his wife. We just saw it again in Minnesota. While this was not an attack on politicians, but on little kids, on 6-year-olds and 8-year-olds in that church. The manifesto was political. It was on all sides. The shooter was an all-purpose hater. But we just keep seeing this. And we must condemn this political violence in every way possible. And I cannot say how important it is that Democrats condemn this attack, but also that Republicans condemn attacks on Democrats. Like, we cannot have this be the go-to answer to shoot someone down because either you don't agree with them or you are someone had access to a gun clearly that should not have had access to a gun. But we must speak out when this happens and condemn the violence in no uncertain terms. And I think leadership right now is bringing people together, not apart.
House Speaker Mike Johnson has said that he's had a lot of members expressing concerns about security back home in the wake of the shooting. Do you think that more needs to be done to ramp up security for lawmakers?
Well, I think clearly they're going to have to look at large events like this and what happened. This was, of course, brought back memories to me of the assassination attempt on the president with someone on the roof. But much more has been done on the member front in terms of coordinating with local police and the like. And my thoughts are not right now, honestly, with myself or members. My thoughts are with this family, with the victims in the church shooting in Minnesota. I'm going to one of those funerals on Sunday, and then making sure that we do everything to support law enforcement in this manhunt.
Horror, anger, disbelief, that is a fair, by no means comprehensive summary of reactions on Capitol Hill to the death of Charlie Kirk. Earlier today, I spoke with Republican Senator John Curtis about that shooting, which occurred in his home state of Utah. Here's that conversation. Senator, some in my audience may know, but many don't, that before you got involved in Washington-based politics, you were the mayor of Provo, Utah, just south of Orem. Best as you can tell, how is your community doing in the aftermath of this horrific murder?
I would be lying if I said this wasn't super hard on the entire community. This is so unlike the peaceful community where we come from in Utah that it's very difficult on all of us.
Did you, Senator, have any trepidation at all about Charlie Kirk coming to Utah Valley University? He had talked to Senator Lee, Mike Lee, your colleague, on a podcast that there were some petitions, some opposition to his arrival. Did you have any notion, did anyone there have any idea that this was not a safe place for this event?
If anybody had asked me, I would have said, go, you will be perfectly fine. Senator Lee and I have been in and out on that campus. We've both spoken there more times than we can count or remember. That we're in and out in that community, inside, outside, and it has always felt very, very safe to us.
Senator, how well did you know Charlie Kirk, or if not that well, how familiar were you with his political movement?
Well, I think it'd be hard to live in America and not be familiar with his movement, the enthusiasm. Interestingly, that area right there is one of the youngest areas in the entire United States. When I represented it in the House, it was the youngest congressional district in the United States. The hospital just a few miles away is the highest birth rate per capita hospital. And so it's not unusual for the youth there to be very excited and to be very passionate and very involved in issues.
And this is a question that a lot of people in Washington are asking themselves. How do you feel with your own personal security? Are there conversations within the leadership or the Senate infrastructure broadly about changes that need to be made or different thought patterns that need to be pursued in order to prevent any one single member of the Senate falling victim to any kind of act of violence?
I think it's fair to say we're having those conversations. I had one with one of my colleagues walking over to the Senate floor today. The problem is I don't see a solution, right? There's 100 of us, 435 in the House. We're all over the United States, in and out of busy places, on airplanes, on trains, in parades. I don't want to say it's an occupational hazard, but in many ways, I just don't know how you solve this. And the alternative is also not acceptable, which is that we stay away from people. We need to be with people. We need to be where people are. But I do think we need to figure out, I'm not going to lie, I'm going to think twice next time I'm in the major parade just a few blocks away, right? I think all of us are going to be rethinking some things, and I hope we come up with a way that allows us to stay very, very connected to those we represent.
In his remarks to the nation, the president said that radical left Democrats were directly responsible for this. Are you in agreement with that?
I've always been very clear. I don't think extremes on either side are healthy. And, I think this is a pivotal point for the country. I love the thoughts of Martin Luther King, who gave us an alternative. He said you can drive out hate with hate, or you can drive it out with love. And obviously, you're not going to drive it out with hate. And so for me and those that I influence, I'm always going to be advocating that we try to drive out hate with love.
And is that something that also in the conversations you presume will have with other colleagues going forward? I mean, look, your chamber was having a conversation not too long ago about 2 members of the Minnesota legislature who were killed. And I talked to Tina Smith on this very program, and she said she was going to engage. I know you're one political actor. You're just one voice. Do you feel overwhelmed that you're just one voice? Do you feel hopeless or hopeful?
So that's a hard question, right? On the one hand, of course, I mean, the magnitude is high, but this is what I'm absolutely convinced of. If every person woke up and looked in the mirror in the morning and said, I'm going to do a little bit to heal the frazzled relationships. We've got mothers who won't speak to daughters. We have neighbors that won't speak to neighbors. And if every one of us woke up in the morning and said, I'm just going to do one thing today to put a little bit of balm on that wound, that would be a solution that would change the United States and change the world.
And does that begin, Senator Curtis, with rhetoric from leaders in the political space, or is it more important that it begin, as you just indicated, with individuals who think about politics but are not in the arena?
Yeah, I think the answer is all of the above, yes. I mean, in a perfect world, political leaders, religious leaders, business leaders, everybody with influence would be spreading that message and be good examples. But the good news is I don't think we're dependent on that. I think that we can make this what I would call a grounds-up movement. And in the best of world, it's top-down, it's bottom-up combined. But if not, I think we need to work on bottom-up, and we can change the world.
Senator John Curtis, Republican of Utah, appreciate the time, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.